I can remember the very first time that I realized that just because I had a thought didn't mean that it was true. I was at work and I had an important letter to mail, and if I waited until the postman came, it would be too late. It wouldn't go out until the next day, and it needed to go out in the mail that day. And there was a mailbox down outside my office, and I said, well, when I go out for lunch, I'll drop it in. They pick it up at 1 o'clock. It'll get in the mail. Great. Lunchtime came, and I'm 2 blocks down the street, and all of a sudden I realized I had forgotten the letter. And I went, oh, Dicken, you're so stupid. It was right there. It was important. How could you not remember? And then I woke up to the fact that I was just making that up. And I'm standing in the middle of the street. It must have looked strange, but I just started laughing. And it was the first time I realized just because I have a thought like that and I feel it strongly doesn't mean that it's true. And I enjoyed my walk back to the office, and I got the letter and mailed it and went on with my day, and it was it ended up just being a nice walk back to the office on a sunny day, rather than in the past I would have been all the way back to the office. How could you have forgotten a letter was right there? What's wrong with you? Now, that was just one example, but I also saw how that worked, so now I'm onto it. So now that when I have this feeling, I immediately start to question, not always, but a lot of the time, start to question the validity of what I'm thinking, so I'm less likely to pay attention to it. And if you don't pay attention to a thought like that, it doesn't hurt you. You still have it, and you'll still have the experience, but it doesn't hurt you, and it passes really quickly. I mean, that's what little kids do. They're always doing that. They're having all kinds of thoughts, and they just don't make much meaning out of them. They pass quickly, and they get over it, and they're on with their life. It's neat to see adults learning this, and then watching how quickly they become like kids again, and begin to be very resilient and get over things really quickly. So you don't try and stop the thinking, you just understand the nature of it, and then it flows through much differently. When I first learned this, there were no books, no tapes, there was nothing. It was 25 years ago. And I was gung-ho about these principles, and I thought all I'd have to do is just tell my kids they were thinkers, and that would do it. And so I would see them when they were in low moods, and I would run up to them and I'd say, oh, sweetie, you're just in a low mood. It's just thought. It's okay. It's going to pass. And she'd look at me, you know, and I hadn't learned yet that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to teach people anything when they're in low moods. But I sure gave it a go, and they put up with it for a couple of weeks. And finally my kids came up to me. My daughter was 14, my son was 8, and my daughter said, Dad, Ben and I have been talking. It was like she was the union rep. And I knew I was in trouble. The two of them are on the same page here. Ben and I have been talking. We've decided if you say one more word about thought or moods, we're going to run away. And my daughter was independent and stubborn and headstrong, and she would have. So I said, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. It's the last thing I wanted to do was turn you off to this. I'll tell you what, I promise I will never say another word about this unless you ask me. I don't know where that came from, but it just popped in, so I stuck to it, and so it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to just live this and sort of walk the talk without being so preachy about it. And so over time they saw that I was more present, more lighthearted, listened better, got over things quickly, was much more open to possibilities, loved to brainstorm. And they noticed that I had really changed significantly. So after almost 6 months, they both started asking me about this. And so I started sharing with both of them just little bits, but now it was very different because I'm telling them while they're in a really great state and they're open and curious and wanting to learn and seeing there's something to this. And so one day I come home from work and my daughter comes running up to me and she says, "Dad, Dad, this stuff works." And I say, "What do you mean?" And she had had her first insight into the nature of thought-created experience. It was the first time she woke up to the inside-out nature of life. And she was ecstatic. She was one of those people that has an insight that helps her see the nature of it so deeply that she changed overnight. She just completely changed overnight. She went from being at 14 years old, she was very emotional, and she was a real drama queen, and was always upset about something, and she'd get upset and she'd stay upset for days at a time, and she'd give my wife and I what we called the look. "Are you getting the look?" And when she had this insight, she went from being a 14-year-old who had the emotional constitution of about an 8-year-old to being like a 45-year-old mature woman. She went from being very introverted to being very, very extroverted, poised, confident, clear-headed, would get over upset in a flash. It was so noticeable that every one of our friends would come up to us and saying, "Oh my God, what has happened to Nina?" And she's never lost that fundamental understanding through, she was 14 then, she's 35 now, and she's a wonderful person, wonderful mother, and is now passing this understanding along to her 2 kids. So it's really been neat to see how this is going out now through the generations, and as really more, we're having kids who are growing up with this understanding. It's exhilarating. I have an awful lot of friends who are teaching this in schools and elementary schools and middle schools, high schools, colleges, but young kids just take to this so simply because it's just common sense, and they pick up on that right away, and they can see it, and it helps them immediately to deal with the inevitable ups and downs in their lives. So it's very, very hopeful for. We now know what we can offer our the younger generations coming up that will really help create a beautiful, beautiful world for people to live in. So that's part of this global vision that I'm seeing too, is that not only will it change from the top down, but it's going to change from the bottom up, and that's really where it's going to have a profound impact on things. So some people just have an insight, and overnight they change dramatically, and that happened to my daughter. And I tell you, when that happened to her, my wife was like all over this. It was like, hey, there's something to this. So she got very interested in learning about this at that point, because the results spoke for themselves.